All right, does it say it's recording?
It should be, yeah.
Okay. All right, I think we can go ahead and get it started. All right. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
sounds good. All right, I believe Misa is going to be introducing our event today, and then I will go through a few things about Twin Cities JACL and National JACL.
Okay. Yeah, so thank you so much for coming today. This is our first panel discussion about we will be exploring Asian American experiences in American schools, as the title says. So basically, we have invited three amazing Asian American teachers to our panel today to discuss different things like cultural identity, and issues that Asian American teachers as well as students might experience in an American school setting. So this will be a pretty casual panel discussion. So if you have any questions, comments you would like to make, please speak up. Or if you would be more comfortable, you can also put comments, questions in the chat in Zoom, and we can answer them. And we will be Asia and I will be going through our questions that we thought might be interesting to discuss one by one. So all our panelists can answer the ones they feel comfortable answering. And we will also be asking some questions we got by our attendees so towards the end. So please look forward to that as well. And yeah, I think that is the basic gist of this panel discussion. Asia, if there's anything you want to add.
Sounds just about right to me.
Okay.
Um, so today, this event is hosted by two members of the Twin Cities JACL, Misa and myself. I'm the youth representative for JACL, and Misa is also on the board. JACL stands for Japanese American Citizens League. We particularly are from the Twin Cities. That is our chapter. There's about over 100 chapters, and JACL in general was founded in 1929. We focus on being advocates for Japanese Americans, Asian Pacific Islanders, and just about everyone and everyone in between. Um, there is also one in Japan, a chapter in Japan. Again, our mission is just to advocate, promote culture, education, social values, and everything. Uh, Twin Cities was founded 76 years ago. Wow, that's so long. A lot of our board members are still on the board. You can see a picture over there to the left. You can see our president, he's in the middle. We also have a lot of our other members, so if you recognize them, they're also in the chat today too. Some programs that we have going on, I'll just go through a few of them. The Kakehashi program, this is a 9-day trip to Japan, and it's available for 18 to 27-year-olds. They do lots of cultural activities and everything. We have a leadership summit, and this is a 4-day trip to DC. And you meet with public officials and do all sorts of meetings, and there's no age limit for this one. Next, we have the Concha Project. This is a 4-day trip to Los Angeles area. Specifically, you're going to be learning about the Japanese American internment camps, and the applications are in February. It's 18 to 25 for this one. I went on that one, so if you have any questions, you can ask me personally. Next, we have the National Convention, and this is 5 days, and it's JACL chapters and members, and you do a lot of workshops, and there's guest speakers, and this year it is in Philadelphia, and it's from July 10th to 14th. Last year it was in Los Angeles, so it kind of moves around. So if you'd like to join, we have a student price right here. Otherwise, if you are curious, I'll drop the membership website into the chat along with all the other programs that I mentioned. And here is our mailing list. We do a lot of cultural events, activities. We have our summer picnic coming up. We have book clubs, we have cooking clubs, whole bunch of different things. So if you're interested in it, we might have it. Otherwise, we might be able to have room to make it. Um, Without further ado, we'd like to get into the kind of the meat of what we're here for today, and that's just kind of starting off introducing our panelists. So we'd love to go around and hear from each one of you just about who you are, what your role is, where you're located, and kind of like your tasks and responsibilities in your position. So whoever would like to start, I mean, I see Paku here. If you'd like to start, Emma, any either of you, just go ahead.
I can get started here. I hope everyone can hear me.
Yes.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Paku Lee, and my pronouns are she, her. I get the privileged to serve as the Director of Asian American Multicultural Affairs at Minnesota State University Mankato. Now we were just talking about Division II basketball, so that's a pretty big deal on our campus right now. Parts of my roles, I have two parts to my role. I do recruitment of prospective students, so getting students either on campus, learning about college or life after high school. I also go into the high schools too and middle schools to talk to students about college. And then I work directly with our students on campus, part of the retention piece of my role. So what I also get the privilege to do is to work with our student organizations, all that I have 5 that are under the Asian American identity groups. So I get to help with student leadership development, do advising, and work with our college students that way.
I also went to that college and Paku helped me find JACL, so it's very special to me.
Oh, it's wonderful. Thank you, Piku.
Can go next. I'm Emma, she, her pronouns, and I am a teacher, a social studies teacher at St. Louis Park High School. This is my 3rd year teaching there, and this year I am teaching AP European History and that's open to 10th graders, and then a Race and Ethnic Studies course that's open 10 through 12. And this is my 2nd year teaching both classes, and then my 1st year teaching I had 9th grade civics. Yeah. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for inviting me for this event. And I'm Gitanjali Mittal. I teach in an alternative school. I do not have a very big amount of students there, but definitely we do have some Asian students. And it's a very different kind of an experience from a normal public school because we find students who have been kind of, I don't want to use the term rejected, but that's how it feels in the system. And when you see that, you also see the lot of things that come along with them. And it's very interesting to see that the Asian students that we have here, they face challenges in a very different way, which we'll definitely discuss. And as a part of my role, I teach them English literature. So I'm an ELA teacher, but I do bring in a lot of cultural histories, art from different communities, and definitely from Asia, because I don't want them to kind of forget that. That's also a part of American society. And apart from that, I do a little bit of advising to students. Some students are assigned to us. And thankfully, I advocate for getting some Asian students so I can talk to them and they feel connected. And we also have another teacher in our school who is also Asian, which is kind of nice balance. So I just feel good that we have that environment for students to come and talk to us. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Did you, I'm sorry, I might have missed it. Which grade do you currently
Yeah.
teach?
I didn't mention that. Thanks for reminding me that. So I teach high school.
High school. Okay. Very cool. Thank you so much. Okay, so I think we want to start off with our first set of questions. First, we're kind of talking about identity. And our first question is, I'm gonna type it into the chat. So as Asian American teachers, I was wondering if any of you feel like you use your identity to serve students in your school. I think Gitanjali, I think you mentioned a bit about that, but if you want to delve further into that, or any of our other panelists want to chime in to this subject.
Yeah, I can kick us off with that. So when it comes to identity, I have been living in the US for the past 12 years. And when you don't see many people around you who look like you, it's hard to feel belonged. And that is also another thing in a lot of schools here, because I have volunteered in a few places and for teaching. And what I saw was um, there is a different kind of an expectations from the students. And when it comes to identity, it's hard to connect with someone who doesn't look like you. And our Asian students, whether they're first generation, second generation, they're also balancing two different cultures. One is Western, and because we are Asians, we are very community oriented, family oriented. So that identity kind of clashes with the Western concept of individualism. And it's very hard for teenagers to figure that out. So when I go to school, I make sure that once in a while, at least once in a week, I do wear my Indian clothes because I want to tell them that being an Asian, being an Indian, being a person, my culture matters to me. And I have the full right to project that outward and inward both. So what I do is sometimes I wear my clothes and they love that and they will definitely ask questions about that. And I tell them that that is my Indian part that I'm very proud of. And that's my Asian identity that I want to project to other people, whether they like it or not, it's up to them. But this is who I am. It's a part of me, and I cannot change myself just because I'm in a different environment, because I am who I am. Though I absorb from my environment, I learn from it, I also take from it, and I also give back to it. And I'm thankful for this country for accepting me, but that doesn't mean that I should be losing who I am. And it's really important for all of us when we talk about that. And when we talk about that, I also talk about different things from India, and I connect that with Asian identities, with Asian things that are a part of our Asian cultures. Like I mentioned, talking about family, which is very important, the community and society, because individualism is a part of our communities too, but that is not in the forefront, pretty much like the Western society. And there's nothing wrong in it. The only thing is how we balance it out. And as two different people within one body, in a way, that's how I feel sometimes, because you have to balance who you are, where you are coming from, and what you listen and hear and talk in your family, to coming to the school where the environment is very different. People don't understand where you're coming from sometimes. You have to balance it out and also not lose yourself while doing so. So how to balance those things out, we often have conversation around that. And I feel that if I project my identity in a forceful, respectful, and at the same time balanced way, they see and learn that, and they feel that they should be proud about who they are, rather than just feeling that, oh, I'm a minority. Minority doesn't mean that you don't belong. Minority doesn't mean that you're not valued. Minority also means that you are different, you're exceptional at the same time. So, how we see that ourselves in that identity, that's what I sometimes talk to them about. When they talk to me about my dress, I say that it's not just a dress, it's me. It's a part of me. And you should not be ashamed of who you are. You should never be made to feel like that. Because sometimes I feel that people do say, like I have heard many a time, oh, you are from India, but your accent is fine. And I'm like, because I teach English literature and I have taught that for 10 years. Oh, your English is good. And that doesn't feel like a compliment sometimes. So I talk to them about that, because if people talk to you in that sense and they say that your English is fine, in a way they are trying to say that we didn't expect it from you. Why? We have been ruled by the British for 400 years and we have managed that language. So it's not. So sometimes it's hard to explain, but I feel that we have to constantly keep on talking about that and bringing that to our youth, especially that who you are. It's also up to you not to just take those influences from people around you and not feel bad about it. So I'll just stop there.
That's very interesting. I had kind of a question. I know you were talking about individualism in the Western culture and I suppose Asian cultures, which are generally considered more collectivist, I suppose. What do you think is kind of a conflict that could happen with those differences if you grew up in kind of a more collectivist background? For example, I grew up in Japan, so I had more of a collectivist background, but then I moved to the United States, which is more individualist. How do you kind of juggle those differences? I suppose you definitely covered some of that, but I was wondering if you had kind of a example.
Yes, definitely, because I do have some Asian students, and we often talk about that there are certain expectations that you have to help the family because there is a family business, for example,
Mhm,
and you are supposed to be helping them out. But then these people, they also want to spend time with their friends.
mhm,
Weekends also mean that having my time, which is how Western culture sees that. But in our community, and I'm talking about the Indian community, there's an expectation that weekends also mean that you spend time with your parents. So
yeah,
balancing that out, it's really important because it also affects your mental health. Because if you don't feel belonged, whether it's family or whether it's school, it impacts you. And then as a teenager, there's also the sense of rebelliousness. There is expectation that as long as you turn 18, you know the whole world, which is not true. 18 might be the legal age to be an adult. Not everyone turns adult at 18. So how you
mhm,
balance these things out is really important, and talking about that and how to be very mindful of talking to your parents about that. That yes, we are living in a different community. We are not a part of. If I'm in India, I would be walking and talking in a different way. But I'm in US, and I understand that I have kids who I tell that you have to learn the language. They have to speak Hindi. They have to listen to Punjabi that I speak. They are
mhm,
learning Mandarin. And the thing is, when we talk about these little things, students also understand that being individual is important, but being collective is also very important because it is a part of being a family. And family, if we go by the structure of the community, like individual, then family, then our neighborhood, then community and society. And we are the ones who are making the society. So if we want it to be a different kind, we have to balance these things out. So we have conversations around that it's important to be with your friends, but your family also matters. So be mindful of how much time you spend with your friends and how much time you spend with your family. Talk about that if there's something important, but be also very respectful to your parents because that's also a very important value that we have. And it doesn't mean constraint all the time. It also means that they care for you and how you project that and how you talk about that also matters important to them because that's how we have grown up. Hope that helps.
it's very interesting. Anyone want to chime in to our previous question or? Sorry, did I just throw it on everyone?
I can go and then help can go after. Yeah, I feel like I think similarly to what Gitanjali just shared, I feel like really showing up that you're trying to show up as your like authentic self and modeling that for students. I think so at St. Louis Park is pretty diverse. Our biggest population of students of color are Muslim students, and then our Black students, and then Asian and Indigenous students after that. And it's pretty small percentage for Asian and Indigenous. It's probably about 2 to 3% of the school. And so I think that I get a lot of students where I could be their first Asian teacher in their schooling, or their first teacher of color. And so I think really just trying to, for me, it's like I'm trying to show up at who I am and go through, why I'm here, and why I really believe in education and learning. And I think that reflects in my teaching and as I'm building relationships with students. And so I think I use my identity often to build relationships with students, right? And to create connections, and to be visible for students. And I think that uh, really works well. And as I'm building relationships with students, I think that um, as they can see who I am and what I'm working to grow in, and why I'm here, they can also are also building in that too, and also trying to figure out, who are they, and what does education mean for the students. And so I think yeah, and I think similarly, affinity spaces kind of tend to naturally happen oftentimes. And so you within our smaller Asian community of students and faculty, we kind of gravitate towards each other to some extent, and work on building that community within our schools, so that we do feel more seen and valued within the school, and can work on building that collective power to try to make some more changes, or just build up our community within the school.
Similarly, I guess a little background about Minnesota State University Mankato. Our populations, it's about 18%, and of that 18%, we're about 5% identified Asian American students. And my within our multicultural center, we have the 4 directors serving our 4 affinity groups. So my work closely with our Asian American students, but I work with everyone that comes through. And thankfully, we have a physical space that students can go to between classes. But there are some students who, during their time in college, they're working towards a career that we don't make a connection. But just the fact that they see my emails and they see ways I've tried to connect with them, and something does pop up, they do know that, oh, there's this person on campus I can go to that can. And there are so many times where there's pushback across campus, like telling me, and I work for our diversity, equity, and inclusion division, you're not a financial aid advisor, you're not an actual academic advisor, limits. And yeah, I understand that, limitations to my role, but that's where the um doesn't serve our diverse populations, when the only person or the only people that they feel connected to be their true self, to not have to explain themselves, their family situation, to someone who wanting to cut that connection. So I'm very aware of limitations of my role, but also limitations across the university, and how universities and institutions does a disservice to our students. So I still continue to meet with students and then make sure that they're meeting who actual financial aid advisor, or that is an actual academic advisor, but that I'm there to bridge those connections. And so even if I'm not connecting with students, if they're looking on the website and they see my name and they're Hmong, or they see my last name and they could assume I'm Asian, I think it gives them a sense of comfort that, okay, I'm at a new school, I'm outside of my home. We're about an hour and a half from the city, comes from our students who are coming to Mankato. So Mankato itself as a city is not as diverse. So I have parents who are looking me up and calling me to take care of their kids. And so whereas students are navigating their identity, I'm constantly aware of my identity and how representation does matter, but also knowing to push back when institutions works against students and also works against staff and faculty who are really trying to be student-centered in their work.
Thank you all for sharing that. It was really insightful, and I like that we can see the difference between, college level and high school level, and alternative schools versus public schools. Um, Really interesting, and I appreciate all your answers to that. It was really interesting. Um, I like to open it up and say if anybody also has another question that they'd like to ask, um, you can speak now or type it in the chat, but I think that we can move to our next question, which is, do you work with many international students, and how often, or how do you change your mode of delivery of services? If any. If you don't work with any, it's not pertinent and you don't have to answer.
Yeah, I can share a bit about my experience. So we do have a Kearney International Center international students, whether they are here on exchange for a semester or two, or they're here doing their whole undergraduate at our university. And I had the privilege during my program to intern at our international center. So I would say that at the height of and I'm worried about the safety are Asian American students, especially with the rise in anti-Asian hate crimes. I was asking our international center questions about what are our Asian international students going through, and they weren't prepared to answer that. They weren't checking in on their students. The answers I got was, "Well, we don't have any students from China." And I was like, if a person, especially Mankato, much of Mankato is still voting red. You see Trump signs everywhere. Um, if a person chooses to be a racist, they're not going to specify like, okay, you're not from this area, so we won't come at you. Like, no, they're going to say you're Asian, go back to your country. This again, not so I work with they serve on our executive boards for they come to me for help, for advising as well. And there's much that the university as a whole can still do to support our international, especially as any other university, if you're recruiting international students, they're usually paying higher tuition. We have a way and they have a scholarship when they're paying in-state tuition, but if their academics do not meet a certain level, then they're charged out of state. So there are some steps to help students, but at the rate that we're recruiting, we're not retaining them and we're not supporting them when they're here. Earlier about individual, those things are pushed onto our international students too, without the context. And as an international student, you're already pushed to be hyper independent, especially when your support system is. So there's much that can be done, and I try to do as much as I space within my division to be a collective. And so I know that's at a university level, and I'm not sure how it is. That's my experience.
I'm hearing, Paku, that you're cutting out a little. Is that the same for everyone else? Okay.
Sorry, I think it did pop up that my connection was not as best, but I hope folks
You still
heard
got
my
it.
response. Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just say that I don't have any international students, so I won't be able to answer that one.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel like it would depend on how we're defining international students. Um, like I'm only working with like 1 or 2 exchange students, and they're both exchange students from Europe right now. And so I think it's just a different experience for high school. And then as far as like, I think I work with a lot of like multicultural students and students that have that have moved recently to the United States from another country, or outside of the US. And so we do quite a few newcomers, and that's actually relatively new within the past few years, that we're getting a lot more newcomers to our school. And I think it's something that our schools needed to adapt to, and that our students are adapting to. And I think it's obviously beneficial for students to be exposing to meet new people that are different from themselves and their families. And I'm not really sure how to answer this question, I guess. So I feel like Kaku probably works most closely. So
Yeah, that's interesting. There's an increasing exchange student, international student population. Do you think there's any effect on the resident Asian American community at your school due to that increasing population? Or not really? It's fine.
it's a good question. Yeah, I don't know yet. I'd have to think about it more.
Okay, got it. So this is kind of related to our former question, but or questions. But do you have any strategies that you recommend as teaching professionals to kind of foster a very supportive community for Asian American students? Sorry. Within the school environment? I know you touched on a few points, but if there's anything else you would like to add as examples, that would be great. How do you stay updated on how Asian American students are doing in your school? In your very different environments.
Hopefully my connection's okay.
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Okay. All right. One thing that I tell myself is to never assume. And I'm from the thought that students know themselves best. And so whereas my identity as a Hmong American woman, um, I may not have the same identity as someone else who is Hmong American, and my identity as Asian American might not be the same as someone else. And so, to build that trust, it usually starts with communication, and to never assume that they have similar experiences as you do, or as a general stereotypical type of experience, and really get to know the student on how they share with you. So that's the advice that I would give to others, because that's something that I personally practice. And how do I stay updated? I know, like, especially we're going into a presidential election year, and so it's gonna be kind of tough, especially for folks on our campus, especially you're coming to school and you see those signs from the neighbors that are surrounding your school. But I do try to stay connected with Asian American news and national news, and then global news as well. I don't know everything, but then students can come to me and say, "Hey, did you see this? This is what's happening," and helping students organize around those important issues. We can't stay silent, and we can't stay complacent. Sure, there are limitations as a state employee on what I can do, but the reasons for why I work and why I get to serve are because of students. So I have to be sometimes in the direct line to protect students, but also to uplift them, that they have voices and they have rights, that they are really the ones to take charge on what a university does or doesn't do. and then also try to get their degree. So I try as much as I can with supporting student leadership, but also like sometimes being at the forefront and sometimes being in the back to really push them. But that's what I would recommend for others too.
Thank you. You said that Mankato, being in Mankato, it's not as diverse as being in the Twin Cities per se. I think there's a very big Hmong population in St. Paul. Is that correct?
Yes, so lots of our diverse students who are in Mankato are coming from the Twin Cities area. For our Asian American population, about half of them are Hmong identifying,
Okay.
but we also have a large multiracial adoptee community as well.
Okay. That is in Mankato.
Yes, as students, yeah, but not
Okay.
in the city. The city is not as diverse.
Okay, got it. Interesting. Thank you very much. Yeah, the presidential election is a very interesting point too. I hadn't considered that. Um, yeah, does that, I wasn't in America when the last presidential election happened, so I don't really know, what kind of changes during those elections. Is there a lot more, cultural conflict around them, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, I would say as a state university, public university, we foster democracy as much as we can. And so where there are direct speakers who are known for their hate speech or their ethnocentric ideas, as a state institution, we're supposed to embrace that. um, and so as a public university, you're supposed to have these difficult conversations with people who have different opinions, and you're supposed to separate the opinion from the person, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the expense of who? And it's always minoritized groups who have to be prepared, like, okay, I'm going to class today. A preacher is going to come and talk about how they hate the LGBTQ community.
Mm-hmm.
And like, how do you navigate going to class to work for a future if you're struck by all these things that are happening, especially
Right,
in a political year? So
right.
it's tough, but I think Gen Z, as we call them, they are the future, and they are tough, and they will call out what's wrong. And so I'm really privileged to be able to be side by side with them. Yeah.
Is there anyone who wants to chime in on this subject or?
Yeah, I can share what I do, and hopefully that would be a little bit helpful. But because, like I said earlier, when we talk about high school, we are talking about teenagers who are still trying to figure out their identities. And when it comes to identity, culture is a very big part of that. So I intentionally bring in lessons in the class where we talk about different kinds of identities. And one part of that is talking about cultural identities. And for example, the Chinese New Year happened, and we talked about the Chinese New Year. I told them that how do the we brought in the story of the Chinese astro signs, and we talked about that. And many of the students had never heard about it, and that I also shared with them that the more you learn about different cultures, the more stereotypes are erased because we create stereotypes in our minds because we don't know about people. We start assuming. And to your point, Paku, you said a very beautiful thing: don't assume. Always talk to the people because the same experiences are not, we are not the same person, we are unique. Our environments are unique, our cultures are similar, but there are many different things that make us who we are. And we talk about those things in classrooms. And when we talk about that, I have seen that the Asian students, they sit in a very different way when you talk about their cultures. They feel so proud because others are listening. And when they're saying, oh, I really didn't know about that, and the more you talk about that, the more the other people become aware. And also make them participate in little things because then it perks their curiosity. They start asking questions and encourage questions about cultures in a mindful way. Because the more we ask, the more we learn. The more we learn, the more we respect and connect with other people. And that's something that is lacking in the society now. And working with teenagers helps me realize that they don't get that kind of an opportunity. There are lots of assumptions about them that they don't know much, but they are ready to learn. They're ready to accept, and they are the ones who are going to create this future. So if you create that curiosity in their mind about other people, about other cultures, languages, and that would create more respect towards others and acceptance at the same time. And more we talk about that, I hear so many different things, and we do art projects as well. So I bring in art from different cultures so that when we are talking about a lesson, for example, if we are talking about Egyptian mythology, so I will make papyrus in the class and I'll make them kind of design their own kind of posters. If we are talking about Chinese astrology signs, do the research. Which sign do you belong to, and what are the qualities of that? And why do you think that that community thinks about that sign in that way? So ask questions about them rather than saying that this is how it is. And reading just two books is not going to bring you knowledge about that. Talk to people. We love the cuisine, we love the food, we love the rituals, we love the different things, and we don't accept the people. That's not how the world should be. So there are things that if they have any question, I encourage that curiosity. I encourage them to ask more questions. And there's a way of asking questions. Like I have heard many people saying, how do you pronounce your name? And I always, in the beginning of the year, I always do a project with my students about the origin of their name. Where did it come from? And I still remember one of my students is called Aoki, and Aoki didn't know the meaning of her name is it's related to a tree. And she was very surprised at a 15-year-old, a 16-year-old not knowing the meaning of the name. When we did that exercise, and there was another student, and these are two Asian students I'm talking about. Chance had a very beautiful story of talking about how she was named Chance. Because it's a very personal story, I won't talk about that, but it told me a lot about her. And we do at these exercises, when we do that, they share that, and then they talk about, and then they ask me about my name. So I told them about how my name came to be, what's the meaning of it. And these are little things, and how cultures name their kids. So talking about different things, I feel it helps. Knowing about different cultures, the more you know, the better you would be as a human being, because it generates that sense of acceptance and also knowing more. Oh, that's how it is. Because I love W.E. Yeats, and he has a beautiful quote. There are no enemies here. There are only friends who we have not discovered yet. And that's how I feel about cultures.
Yeah, I feel like I'm just gonna echo a lot of what Baku and Gitanjali just said. I think, yeah, fostering curiosity and just a sense of like loving to learn and about yourself and about others is really important. I think in our like race and ethnic studies class, we also do a lot of work surrounding our identities and the identities of the students in the room. And I think as like a strategy or recommendation, I feel like a lot of that work always starts with yourself and knowing who you are and knowing what makes you you. And I think if you like developing my identity and like a strong sense of who I am, then allows me to feel like really curious and wanting to know about who other people are. And I think like knowing who I am also helps me stay grounded in the work that I'm doing, or the or how I'm engaging in a classroom and with students in our community. So I think like that's something that I would recommend, just, you know, being, knowing who you are and having a strong sense of why you're doing what you're doing. And I think like that really, that definitely comes across with students, right? Like if I can always explain why we're doing this activity or why I think like learning about each other is important, then I think that carries with them. And they're like, okay, I see why Miss Emma knows like why she cares about this. So like, why do I care about this too? And I think that really helps build a sense of community in our classroom, and I think helps the students feel like they have a sense of belonging in our school and in our St. Louis Park community as a whole. And so I think that would be something I'd recommend. And another would be, I feel like just being involved in things that you really care about, and finding the people that you share values with and that you share goals and visions with the students and with the school. And I think so much of that can happen pretty naturally once you start building relationships with people and you're like, oh, you're really passionate about building like restorative practices team or something, that's something I want to support in or work towards with as well. And so I think finding people that you feel really close to and can work together with towards building something better and is great, and also makes school / the work and job feel way more sustainable and supportive long term wise, I would say. Yeah, so yeah.
Yeah, I think what all of you mentioned is really related to current events in Minnesota and what is going on. And we can really see that a lot of the work to inform others of Asian culture is put on the teachers a lot of the times. And there's not a ton of Asian teachers, especially in Minnesota. And that we are really, that's a great benefit that we are able to do that as teachers, but also it's also a flaw that we're not learning enough about Asian culture through the curriculum. And it also kind of brings me to my next question, which is like in my program, I'm currently going to school for school psychology, and I think the most extent that we even talk about Asian Americans and Asian culture is the model minority myth and how that's the main thing that is really associated with Asian and Asian Americans. So that is kind of leading to my next question, which I put in the chat. Have you observed any instances where staff members may hold the perception in your schools or in your lives where you are currently seeing this still held up in education?
I can start all the time. So, and then also within my role, I am, and how I present, I am seen as someone who may not ask for much or may not be advocating for others. And so, if you've seen the latest census and lots of work around Asian American advocacy is the need to disaggregate data when we're looking at high school graduation or even college degree attainment. Asian Americans seems to be doing well, but when you disaggregate the data, you see the differences between, which type of Asian American are you, and so it's still the data still says that Southeast Asian Americans are not obtaining a college degree or maybe not graduating at higher rates of other Asian Americans. And those things are very important, again, because we are all so diverse. And there are some things that we can relate to, things that generations may have experienced that impacts the later generations, but that you're careful and you are looking into all these deeper things that data doesn't show. And so I'm constantly fighting why my role is important, why Asian Americans in higher ed is very important for the state, for the nation, for the better of our people, and that it is a right that everyone should have access to. So if you also aren't understanding of or maybe knowledgeable of the history of the United States, it can be very tough to see how your identity and how you show up is politicized and coupled with the individualistic mindset of American culture, you might think like, oh, this doesn't impact me. But because our identities are politicized, your identity, even if you think it's not important, someone else making decisions is deeming it as important or unimportant. And so, as hard as it can be, I know Emma shared earlier, like it starts with you as a person knowing yourself to foster that to students to know who they are and to take their rights and practice the rights that they have, especially in the United States. And then with our international students, I'm gonna go back to that real quick. Um, Race in the US is very different from race anywhere else in the world. And so for any of the students that come to the United States, I almost think it's mandatory to understand how race is like and how your identity can be um, politicized while you're here studying, whether your goal is to stay in the United States and work or to go back to your home country. It can take a toll on a student. So I would say yes, I'm constantly fighting for our students and also for myself. I think growing up, I was a part of the generation that was like, stay quiet, just do your job and minimize yourself. And it wasn't really until I went to college that I realized, okay, some of those things could be cultural, but a lot of those things don't serve us anymore. And so, again, I try to foster that with our students to be active and to know who you are. And maybe you have a clash of who you are, who your parents or your family or what you think your culture is telling you to be, but pick and choose at what serves you and really go from there.
So we have already formed a pattern here, Paku, me, and then Emma. So I was like, let me unmute myself. Yeah, thank you, Paku, for sharing that. I feel that um, like my school is a very small school in the sense we just have 50 students, I said. But I do see that there are certain expectations when it comes to the race. And we have a lot of Black students. We also have Asian students, and Asian students somehow, um, which was kind of a surprise for me as well. Like it was kind of 25% of the students that we had. And the students that I have like seen as more like they are quiet and somehow on their own, they form their own groups. So we have Black students have their own group, Hispanic students have their own group, and the Asian students have their own group. Which was, I don't know whether somebody formed that or how it happened, but that's how things have been. When we have group meeting, I somehow see that, like, I noticed that because I have worked in nonprofits, so I kind of like have my analytical hat on most of the time there when these gatherings happen. So it's very interesting to see how these things are, and the Asian students are somehow more quieter as compared to the others. And there's a certain expectation that, yes, oh, this person doesn't make any trouble. And if they ask questions, um, they are kind of like they have their own expectation. Okay, this is how the person is going to behave. Um, and if there is by chance any time that the student flares up, which happens with teenagers, they are seen more as an Asian person rather than a teenager. And sometimes we do question that. So thankfully, I have a team which is very attentive towards the race and the dynamics that come with that. So we do talk about DEI a lot. We got trained as well um, a lot about these things. And I always give a disclaimer that don't see me as I'm an Indian, but I'm really bad at math. And when it comes to technology, I fumble a lot. So these kind of, and I start with that with my students as well and with the staff members, because when you see an Indian person, it's, oh, they know everything about IT. Not every Indian knows about IT, and not everyone who is Indian is into IT all the time. So these are little, like I talked about stereotypes, I'll go back to that. When we don't know about people, we stereotype and we assume things. And that's how things are. So sometimes you, on your own, have to give that disclaimer. My kids used to go into a very dominant white school and they scored well. And people were like, some of the teachers there, white teachers, they were like, oh, they'll definitely do well. They come from an Indian family. And I was like, no, I don't spend time with them. They do their whatever they study on their own. And it's their curiosity, and not because they are Indians that they have that. And I was an average student. I don't tell my students that you have to get this kind of grade, you have to behave this way. Just be yourself. That's the most important thing in this world at this time. And that's how things should be. So assuming about people doesn't help. Again, talking about those stereotypes, I feel it's really important. And it's also important to have questions related to that. I really loved how you talked about the disaggregation of the data, which is really important. And there has been a lot of effort going on towards that, because just clubbing everyone together, and it's pretty much like saying that my whole class has got 90%. Not everyone is at 90%. Some people are at 100, some people are at a different level. You just club the whole data and you present a very unfinished, rough, incomplete picture of the whole class, which is not true. Every person has a different need. Every person has a different ability. How are we going to disaggregate and know that and cater to that? Pretty much like I am teaching 10 students and every student is different. Someone is at a different level when it comes to vocabulary. Someone is good in grammar. Someone is good in writing it down. Someone is very good with poetry. And I can't say that all my students are best. They have some abilities, they have some questions, they also have some places where they are lacking in and they need more effort in. And if I say that all of them are really great in doing everything, I'm not paying attention to where the things need more attention. And if I'm not disaggregating their needs, I'm not catering to them. And that's what is happening with the data as well. So knowing about those things, questioning those, and having the clear data outside is really important.
I think you kind of answered my supplementary question too. This was the audience question. Sorry, Emma. There was a question from the audience asking about the model minority myth. They said, I grew up accepting the model minority myth and didn't learn about its origins until much later. Is this a topic you address with your students or classes? So I think it seemed like you very intentionally try to kind of take away these expectations from students based on their race. Yeah, just wanted to comment on that.
Yeah, no, thank you. We do talk about these things. Like when I talk about cultures, I do bring in that. And one question that I give to them is I give them a list of different ethnicities and people from different countries, and they have to write down without doing any research. What do they know about? For example, if I give them a list and they would have Black people, Hispanic community, Asians, so they have to write down what have they heard about these communities, and all the things that come up are really interesting because most of the time what I hear about the Asians is like they're very good at education, they could get good jobs, they are paid highly, they have really good jobs and all that. And I'm like, not everyone has a good job. That's and then I do them make them do the research about these communities, and then they're like, oh, I didn't know about that. So first you let them present that this is what like, and we do that a lot in nonprofits, like where we were at before the training and where we are after the training. So let them question that, because when they see that gap, that's where the curiosity is generated. And then they start questioning. Until they start questioning, they're not going to learn and we are not going to change anything. And that's why I love doing what I do, teaching the youth, because it's the spark is already there. You just have to let them know that that's there, and you have to make big and nice use of that. And a lot of alternative students are very creative, very quiet, and they need more attention and more connection. And that's the beauty of this whole environment, that in that small setting, when you have few students, you get to know them better, and you can talk about that in more details, and also give one-on-one attention to them. And when we talk about those things, there are lots of things that come out. So again, going back to the same thing, that question the stereotypes, talk about data, and also talk about like what biases we have created, because we are hearing about these things around. and not questioning them. Be aware of your environment, be aware of what is happening in your neighborhood and also what is happening in your state. And then you can go to the national level and also think about that. So coming from within to without, and also learning from outside to create the within. So that's my philosophy of teaching, and that's what I do in the class a lot of time.
Thank you very much for sharing. Emma, is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think so. I'll start with the most recent question of do we talk about the model minority myth? And we definitely do more so in race and ethnic studies. I think in the beginning of our class, we always start with a pretty similar unit of diving into identity, race, and culture. And a part of our unit is looking at our racial autobiographies, which is essentially a narrative looking at how race has impacted and shown up in our lives throughout our lifetime. And so I like talk about it a lot when I share my racial autobiography with the students, and the students are, for our Asian students, it comes up often as they're, you know, diving into how race has shown up in their lives and how they are growing in their racial consciousness and understanding of race. And then I think, you know, they're talking about it with each other and how, and they're shared in different experiences and whatnot. And I think like for our school broadly, the model minority myth shows up the most, I think, in similarly in expectations and in what is expected of our Asian students in comparison to our white students or our Black students. And I think often times where I see it like hurt or have the biggest impact is when students and staff are almost like punished or reprimanded for not knowing the expectations or for not knowing the processes or rules or procedures that are set in place, because it's expected that they just know them, that we just know them automatically, or come in and should, you know, be this perfect student or staff member. And so then when we are not, we're not living up to the expectations that are placed on us as people perceive us as this like model minority. And so I think that comes with like similar, like trying to really advocate and continue to ask questions and push back on these things, and you know, trying to ask a lot of questions of, well, if it's an area of growth for the student, how can we see like that mistakes that are made or whatnot can be, you know, areas for growth and improvement, rather than like punishing our Asian students for, you know, making the same mistake that a white student might make. And so I think that's like where I see it the most. I'd also probably say just in within, yeah, well, it's probably pretty similar within the classroom as far as providing less support for Asian students, because the expectation is that they will just know and learn the content automatically and don't need as much support, or that they have like more supportive families at home in comparison to you know, our Black families or whatnot. And I think that's, you know, also used to try to pit people of color against each other and really it disadvantages our Asian students, because like Patanjali is saying, like every student needs their own unique form and different forms of support. And so we really have to know students like at an individual level in order to be able to provide that.
Thank you, Emma. I think we only have 15 minutes left, so I think we'd like to open space for any questions our attendees have. If not, we can keep on asking a few more questions. You can speak up or add a question or comment in the chat section if that's what you prefer. Okay, maybe not. Shall we go on to, we kind of wanted to discuss the education system a bit more and Asian American history in particular. I think, Emma, you touched on that a bit in your previous answer, but we were wondering what your perception of how we teach Asian American history is currently. Do you think we teach it enough? If it was I mean, how would you change our education system in general? Kind of a big question, but in addition to Asian American history, how would you change the system to create a more supportive environment for our Asian American students and teachers?
I think I have shared a little bit about that, what I do. I feel that because again, it's an alternative school, so we have um, the right to create our own curriculum. And though I teach English, I bring in a lot of cultural studies in it, and a lot of Asian history, because I feel that it's not enough, because I am a mother of two students, and I especially send my children to a Chinese immersion school because I want them to learn more about Asian history, because that I feel lacking in the white schools that they were going to, which is unfortunate because we are not only one race here and we are not only two races here. America is composed of a lot of different races, different cultures and languages. And I seem like harping the same tune time and again. The more we learn about others, the better it's going to be. And that's what I feel when it comes to, and when we don't see the histories of our own communities in our books, we're not going to learn about them. We're not going to learn and we're not going to know about them. It's kind of erasing um, something important of my own identity in the books that I'm reading. So I intentionally bring in, I feel that it's not enough in the schools that I sent my kids to. And our school, it's a white teacher who teaches social sciences. So I keep on questioning, are you going to teach about that? Are you going to talk about that? Kind of like pushing him. And he's open to that, which is nice. And I heard a comment from one of the students who is Native American, but she said that it was really nice learning about a different history and a different culture from a person who's not white. And it's important to see the visibility of more Asian teachers, because the Asian history, when we tell our stories, it's going to have a different impact than someone else is going to tell the same story. If it's my story, it'll be more emphatic. And I would be adding more things to it from my own knowledge, from my ancestors, from what I have heard from them, and what I have lived. So my lived experience adds on to that. My ancestors' lived experience, our histories add on to that, rather than someone else who is going to teach it as a lesson. In our hands, it becomes history in the real sense. In the hands of a white person, it would become a lesson only, where you are reading about something. First of all, it's not enough, that there are not enough lessons and histories in the books, in the curriculum. And on the other hand, the second thing that is impacting the whole thing is I feel it's not in the hands of people who have lived it. So someone else is telling your story and they'll tell it in a limited way. If I am going to teach it, it's going to be very different. And that comment opened my eyes, because I was doing it because I love different cultures and I love my identity as an Asian, as an Indian, and as a woman. So I have those leanings, and that's what I bring into my lessons and the way I teach. And the more I bring about that, the more questions I generate, the more curiosity I create, the more people are going to learn. And that's where the whole thing is. And when we talk about the Asian history, there are so many things people don't know about: the incarcerations that happened, the history of immigration, and the bans that were there for people not to come from certain countries at a certain time. Lots of things that people don't know about. They just know there are immigrants who are coming here. But as within immigrants, we have different histories at different timelines, and nobody is knowing about that. So I feel that it's really important that we add on more and the impact, and also there's not enough about the contribution that our communities have put in there. So that is also needed. That's where I feel that thankfully I'm in a position that I can bring that into my classroom through my film studies class, through my literature, because I bring in literature from the authors that are not only the English authors. So I bring in translated work into my classroom from Asian people, especially, so that they can learn about that. And then they learn about that person, then they are more curious about more things.
Thank you very much. If there's anything else you wanted to add on to that, Emma or Paku, or there were some other questions regarding, for example, being an Asian American student or teacher, for example, in the 40s or 50s or 70s versus now, what kind of difference there has been, or since there are so many biracial and bicultural Asian Americans and Korean American students, how we can support those students. Yeah, anything that you guys would like to add some ideas on, that would be greatly appreciated.
Okay, I can try to answer both of the questions.
Yeah, I'm sorry I dumped so much on you guys
Okay.
at the last
Uh,
moment.
So I'm new to teaching. It's only my third year. And I've been at St. Louis Park for all 3 years, and our district has this pretty like intense dedication to our like mission and vision, and it's all surrounding racial equity. So we've got this whole like racial equity plan and purpose and whatnot. And so I feel like at our school, there is a lot of permission and support to teach really explicitly about race and identity and culture, and how it shows up in the United States and in our community. And so I feel like there is quite a bit of support for what that like looks like curriculum wise and within the classroom when it comes to racial equity work. I do think like obviously we've got a lot of work still to do, and then a lot more could be done as far as how to like support people and humanize the education and the curriculum that we're asked to teach and lead and whatnot. And I think like there is always room for more for more education about Asian American history and people's history in general. And we're also working in like in a school timeline of however many 9 months or however many we get total. And so I think it's hard to try. I struggle to find a balance of like, okay, what are we gonna do? What are we not gonna do? What are we gonna have time to do, etc. And so that's always something I'm thinking about. And I think within like our race and ethnic studies course, so much of it is like students will do their own thing, like what they're interested in, and then they'll come back together and share with each other. So trying to maximize as much as like what the students want to learn, giving them opportunities to learn whatever they feel curious about, and then coming together to make sure that they're sharing what they're learning so that they are getting a wider variety of perspectives and curriculum and whatnot. Yeah. And personally, I have not really felt as much pushback for like teaching critical race theory, for teaching about race. our school has received some pushback about teaching LGBTQIA plus curriculum, and that's probably our biggest piece of pushback right now, I would say. And so our school is doing what they can, I think, to support the LGBTQIA plus community and encouraging us to continue teaching and about it and about the communities and whatnot. And it's also, I don't know, it's kind of a part of a larger conversation of how do we pull families in and make sure that everyone feels heard and also like valued within our community, and what does that really look like. So yeah, I think we're not seeing as much like explicit messaging about anti-critical race theory. I think it probably comes through in more implicit messaging, right? Like when our families ask for us to close down open enrollment, or when we're asked to, because a lot of our open enrollment, we get a lot of students from Minneapolis and a lot of students of color specifically through our open enrollment. And so when our like white families are saying, oh, we should no longer have open enrollment, I think that is definitely more implicitly coded messaging as far as, okay, we should not have students of color in our school. And we have more messaging of like, oh, what is it from families or feedback from families that it's like, oh, what does this racial equity mission have to do with education, and does racial equity work align with rigorous or like academic or high expectations for our students? So there's a lot of feedback in that sense, which I feel like is a little bit more under the table than explicitly saying like, oh, don't teach about race. Yeah.
Thanks, Emma. I really appreciate your input on that. That's really interesting to know about St. Louis Park and in particular. I know we only have a couple minutes left, and so if Baku, if you have any final thoughts, if you don't, that's okay too.
I would just add that my journey has K through 12 been in St. Paul Public Schools and then other areas as well, but I didn't learn about ethnic studies or anything, saw myself reflected in the curriculum until college. And that's why I studied cultural anthropology and ethnic studies for my undergrad. And so I would just say that the individual journey, I think it never ends. And we just continue to learn more about ourselves and to then help others to learn and be their most authentic self. Thankfully, I'm a part of the Minnesota State Universities and Colleges system, and so we have a min-state goal of closing the opportunity gap between diverse students and majority students by 2030. And so even if we have folks, whether they're donors to the university or folks who are within the campus and they don't agree on DEI teachings or certain things that are happening or our department getting funding to support students, it's still the initiative of the Minnesota State Colleges and University system that values diverse students and values educating Minnesotans and also whoever comes through our state colleges and universities. So I think Minnesota so far has been a good example for other states. But yeah, it is tough, and it's difficult to hear that just across state borders it can be so different for other teachers, for other students. But and thank you again for hosting and inviting us to be on the panel.
We really appreciate all you coming and our panelists and our visitors here. So thank you so much, everyone. We want to respect your time too. So thanks for joining on a holiday, recognized as well. Yeah, thank you so much for answering all these questions. I know you took time out of your day to answer that, and we really appreciate that. And then also we'll be the recording will be online for YouTube through JACL, so we'll be posting about that. If you'd like to show any of your family members or any other educators, you are free to. And then if you have any other questions, you can reach out to myself or Misa and just let us know if you have anything else to say. Um, I think I'll be sticking around, so if you have anything that you want to unpack or you want to talk about, I'll be here too. But thank you so much for joining us. Thank you. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much,
so much.
everyone. Have a nice evening.
Okay, thanks for hosting. This
Thanks
has
for
been great.
coming.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
It's really nice to
Thank
see
you.
you.
Yeah, it's nice to see you all. Again, Shaka, it's great to see you too.
Take care. Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Bye. Okay.
Oh, we should probably stop the